Hey guys, so oftentimes when I do these type of list videos, I'll discuss the games in question in a bit of a vacuum, not really ranking them on my personal opinions, but rather just listing the games off that fit into whatever video's topic, explaining how they work, and then sort of call it a day. However, I will oftentimes get asked to make top 10 lists based on my opinions, which admittedly do change over time. That said, I figured I'd give in this time around and discuss with you guys my top 10 favorite monster taming games that are on the Switch right now that are out, and why I feel that way. Also, make sure to keep in mind that, of course, these are my opinions and should not be taken as which games are definitively the best. But yeah, let's dive in. Okay, so coming in at number 10, we have Digimon World Next Order. Now, before you get those pitchforks out, I do have to say that the reason I'm only putting this at number 10 is because I haven't fully completed the game just yet. We are currently doing a Let's Play, so this could easily change moving forward. I did want to include it on the list, however, because I do think it's a really good game and I'm extensively enjoying it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this video explaining what the games are necessarily, since we do that in our list videos. This is going to be more so based on what aspects of the games that I really enjoy, just to avoid redundancy. But Digimon World Next Order has a really good mesh of monster raising, where you have to make sure your Digimon are fed, use the toilets, etc., and exploration via its world. And honestly, it looks great despite it being a 2016 title, and it has a really cool branching evolution system that Digimon is known for, so there's also that to consider. All in all, I really like this game and I could easily see it moving higher up on the list once I've completed it. Monster Crown is a bit of an interesting case because while it's a game I definitely enjoyed, I'm also not ignorant to the fact that it does have a lot of bugs and some aspects to it that a lot of people don't necessarily like. I'll start with some of the flaws before getting into what I enjoy, but the game is, at least as of the time I've last played it, very buggy, whether it be menu bugs or collision bugs, and I did personally feel like the story was a little bit short and the pacing was off in some aspects. That being said, I am a lot more lenient when it comes to solo dev indie projects, especially given the discounted price that a lot of these games come with, but there are aspects of the game that I do think are really cool, and I think Monster Crown in concept does have a really strong foundation. The game features a unique crossbreeding system that allows you to fuse monsters together, inheriting various aspects of their stats, colors, fusion forms, and more. It also includes randomly generated card dungeons, a more bleak outlook at the monster taming genre, which is definitely nice to see, and a pixel art style that I honestly vibe with, especially being someone who grew up with Pokemon Red and Blue. The monster designs in this game are also really cool, with a lot of rugged reptilian creatures, and the lore itself is interesting as well. Again, it is lower on the list just because there are definitely issues with the game and it's not perfect, but Monster Crown is one of those games where you'll play it and either really love it or really hate it, so take with that what you will. Okay, again, before I see those pitchforks, yes, TEMTEM is number 8 on this list. Remember, this is based on my personal opinions and not based on which games are objectively more advanced or which ones are 3D or which ones present better or anything like that. TEMTEM in concept is a really cool idea. You have a Pokemon-like MMO that features a unique cast of TEMTEM to capture and battle against, a ranked PvP system, local co-op, raids, and of course the ability to see everyone and their TEMTEM in the overworld. Hell, it even has a battle frontier and post-game content. Pretty much everything people want from a monster taming game, but it's also not without its flaws, which for me add up, especially as someone who's beaten the game twice, once on PC and once on Switch. Firstly, while the amount of grind in the game has been reduced, I feel like TEMTEM is one of those games that because it's an MMO, there needs to be value behind what exists in it, and as of such, things have to be more rare, thus requiring more grind. The problem here is that TEMTEM doesn't really feel like a true MMO in the same vein as something like RuneScape or World of Warcraft, and before I hear people in the comments saying that this was never their intentions in the first place, I fully understand that. However, that does not invalidate the idea that TEMTEM has a lot of, quote, downsides of being an MMO, like increased grind, but in my opinion features very few of the upsides. A lot of what TEMTEM has going for it works just fine in a single player context, and I'm really hard pressed to understand why it needed to be an MMO in the first place, besides just the marketability of having a Pokemon-like MMO. Because you always have to be online, you can't really play the game portably on Nintendo Switch or Steam Deck, and other than raids, which Pokemon also has a version of, which doesn't require you to be online all the time, the game just feels like it could have been an offline experience with multiplayer elements or even just had an offline mode. I've seen some people argue that being an MMO makes it easier to prevent hacking, but honestly, I don't see making an entire game an MMO, requiring constant internet connection, increasing grind, and all the stuff that comes with it as a reasonable way to cut down on cheating, especially since TEMTEM has its online battle simulator, which in and of itself reduces or completely gets rid of the need to cheat anyways. Other than that though, the game is good, it's very crisp, the game plays well, the gameplay is good, I like the combat system, but I will definitely say that there are a few things keeping it back from being like number 1 on this list, for example. Okay, now I know people are going to get mad, especially since I just talked about TEMTEM and then I'm putting Legends Arceus on top of it. However, again, we are talking about personal enjoyment, and I do really have to say that Pokemon Legends Arceus, while not being close to what I'd consider the perfect Pokemon game, was the most enjoyable Pokemon game, at least in my opinion, since Gen 7, and I like that Legends really felt like Pokemon's first attempt in trying something new, but beyond that, the real-time aspects of this game were actually done pretty well, with wild Pokemon being able to actually hurt you, and while going from real-time to turn-based combat could feel a little jarring at times, I personally prefer this style much more than Scarlet and Violet. The stealth aspect of being able to sneak up on Pokemon was also really cool, and honestly, like, it was a pretty fun game. The story, again, wasn't revolutionary, but it was more interesting than anything we'd seen recently. The Arceus completionist quest was cool, and I'd like to see more mainline games take more inspiration from Legends. Obviously, I wouldn't want to see the battle system from Legends or the progression from that game make it into a mainline game, but those stealth mechanics and the real-time aspects are really fun in my opinion. Coming in at number 6, we have Monster Hunter Stories 2, which in my opinion, just like Next Order, is another great example of a 3D monster taming game on Switch that just looks great given its art direction. This is another game that has a lot of content and areas to explore, with a system in place that leaves the world feeling full rather than barren like we see with a lot of open world games. Firstly, the game has dens, which act as these randomly generated layers by which you can find new monster eggs. It's got a ton of overworld encounters and has a unique caveat of having you battle alongside your monster in a JRPG format. A lot of monster taming games will have you battle with your monster, but generally that's more of a real-time thing, so it's pretty cool to see this. I find the story to be really fun, the characters are pretty memorable, and you even get some callbacks to the original game on 3DS. I will say that gameplay-wise, some boss battles can feel a little drawn out from time to time, with some battles feeling like they take forever, but the Rite of Channeling is a cool system allowing you to add unique aspects to your monsters, and honestly, it's an example of a monster taming game that completely veers away from the Pokemon formula, but still manages to really stand out. Digimon Survive is a really contentious title because, much like some of the other games on this list, a lot of people either hated it or loved it, and I think that has a lot to do with, number 1, the lack of marketing in the West, and number 2, the niche nature of the title. I personally wasn't even sure if I would enjoy the game, but I did go in with an open mind, and to be honest, I really enjoyed it. The tactical RPG aspect was easy enough to enter as a newcomer to that sort of genre, and the visual novel, while not typically my taste, did a really good job of encapsulating those nostalgic Digimon adventure vibes, which I always like. The game also features different options, allowing for 3 separate endings and a couple of secret ones, and while I definitely felt like a lot of the dialogue options didn't really surmount too much individually, as a whole, I really like this concept and would love to see another Digimon game in the same vein as Survive at some point in the future. There was a lot of controversy surrounding the game because people felt like the marketing was misleading, but I personally feel like the issue was that the marketing wasn't abundant enough. So the people that weren't really paying attention wouldn't really know. But yeah, even if you're not into tactical RPGs or visual novels, if you're a Digimon fan, give it a try, you might like it. Shin Megami Tensei 5 is the latest iteration in the SMT franchise, and I've got to say, it's a really good fucking game. I saw a comment somewhere a year or so back where someone was basically saying that SMT 5 proves that turn-based games aren't, and I quote, outdated like some people try to express, and I couldn't agree more. The game features a press action system, which has been a thing in SMT forever, but allows you to use a certain amount of commands before your enemy gets to attack, and the attacks happen as the commands are made. The game also has different attributes, which are their versions of types, and these also have their own properties, like certain types being able to one-shot randomly. And on top of this, Shin Megami Tensei 5 also builds on the already established Shin Megami Tensei format, which is already good in and of itself, but on top of that, you get to traverse a semi-open world wasteland with the ability to sprint, run, sneak up on enemies, etc. Basically, the game looks good, the gameplay is fire, and the demons are pretty iconic too. The story, in my opinion, was good, but from what I've seen from SMT fans, it was not as good as the other SMT games, but I'll let you guys decide. Next up, we have one that I'm sure you're all expecting, and that being Coromon, but I do want to put a little asterisk here. The developers are working on creating a new ending for the game and adding more features that were not present at the initial launch, so I do want to say that there is a chance that this could move up. Coromon has probably some of the best pixel art I've seen in the entire genre, coupled with a fun Pokemon-like adventure, a unique potential system that changes the color of your Coromon depending on their stats, and I'm even in the game as an NPC, so it's easy to see why I would like this type of game. Some of its shortcomings, at least for me, involves the game's battle system being a little bit less complex than Pokemon, not by a huge margin, but nevertheless, the Coromon Pokemon are monotyped, and the game's story is interesting, but I do feel like it could have been pushed even further, and again, we might see more of that in the future. I've talked about Coromon at length on this channel, so I don't think I need to dwell on it too much. Okay, so it was really hard for me to decide between this and Coromon because I love both games a lot, but I will say that Monster Sanctuary does a lot to differentiate itself from any other monster taming game. The combat is extremely unique, featuring a combo system and skill trees, which at least in the monster taming genre is not very common. And whenever I talk about Pokemon-like games, you'll oftentimes hear me talk about TEMTEM or Coromon, but I never include Monster Sanctuary because it's not a Pokemon-like. It's an RPG with monster taming, but it's very much its own thing. The game's also a cross between a Metroidvania and the aforementioned RPG, which I think is honestly done beautifully. The story is also not revolutionary like many monster taming games, but I definitely will say it's one of the more interesting ones. And the monster designs are awesome, the battles are awesome, the boss monsters are awesome. It's just honestly an awesome game. Okay, so coming in at number 1, we have Nexomon Extinction, which as of right now is my favorite monster taming experience on the Switch, and probably in general, at least in terms of the modern monster taming genre. Now, let me preface this by going over the game's shortcomings before I praise it. The battle system's extremely simplistic, with most Nexomon only learning moves of their own type or normal type, and speed doesn't really play a huge factor, nor are there any sort of special stats, meaning that attack, defense, and HP are basically the only stats that are running the show. This leaves a lot of Nexomon of the same types feeling very same-ish, and unfortunately, that means that despite having over 400 Nexomon present within the game, only a handful are going to really feel useful. Other than that though, the game has one of the most fun and enjoyable stories I've seen in a monster taming game to date. The narrative really takes the forefront and compels the player to certain points in the world, and I really like that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is some crazy 400 IQ narrative that revolutionizes storytelling as a whole, but the game does do an amazing job of adding excitement, dread, and humor to its narrative, making each of the game's characters feel more memorable, and that's something I can't say for a lot of monster taming games. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm getting old, but I find that it's getting harder and harder for me to remember characters throughout my time playing different games. But with Nexomon, I might not remember everyone's name specifically, but if you show me a Nexomon character, I'll be like, oh yeah, that person that did this, this, and that. Like, they all just feel so fleshed out, even if there's not a whole lot of time dedicated to any given person. I don't want to spoil too much if you haven't played it yet, but this game, honestly, from a story perspective, is one of the most fun RPGs I've played in a while. It also features a semi-open world, which I thought was really cool, and the Nexomon roster is just solid in general. On top of all of this, there's also a pretty significant post-game in the form of the Abyssals, which further added to the story and even added Nexomon from the original game over to Extinction. And there you go, guys. Those are my top 10 picks for monster taming games on Switch. Again, like I said at the beginning, I don't usually do these top 10 opinion-based videos just because it's really hard for me to rank things, but I'm hoping that you guys kind of see why I picked which games and why they ended up where they are. I think that every one of the games on this list is enjoyable for different reasons, and there's no right answer as to which one's the best, so definitely consider trying out all of them if you have the chance. Make sure you guys let me know in the comments which of these games are your favorites and why, or which monster taming games I didn't cover that are your favorites. If you want to stay up to date on monster taming games, definitely subscribe to my channel. We put out new monster taming videos every single day. You can check out my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon as well, linked below. Special thanks to the patrons, especially Jim Hamilton, Dro Ghost, Dark Persona, Candy Morency, and Exodus, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.